You're listening to Eating for Eden, Episode 8. When it comes to doing something about climate change, your food choices matter. Thanks for tuning in to Eating for Eden, a podcast that takes a food-first approach to climate action. I'm your host, Jessica J. Schroeder, and I am passionate about food that tastes good and does good. I'll guide you with practical tips and help you thoroughly enjoy your food along the way. You may have heard that eating plant-based is inherently more expensive. This is a myth. Just like someone could technically eat vegan while eating terribly, living on donuts, potato chips, and oat milk frappuccinos, it is certainly possible to spend a lot on groceries and technically eat plant-based. However, when focusing on a plant-based way of eating that emphasizes whole foods, lowercase, I mean foods in their whole form, it is actually quite easy to spend less on groceries, not more. Today I want to talk about how eating plant-based isn't just better for the environment, it's also better for your wallet. And if the notion that plant-based eating is better for the environment than consuming a moderate to high amount of animal foods is a new concept to you, check out episodes 1 and 3. I realize that with rising costs of groceries everywhere, and with the high cost of purchasing organic, this probably sounds rather counterintuitive. And yes, it is also very easy to spend a lot on groceries no matter what dietary pattern you're attempting to follow. With all grocery shopping, a bit of planning and care are required to get the most bang for your buck. While it is certainly true that many plant-based alternatives can be quite pricey, it is also true that some of the healthiest foods on the planet, and some of the best for the planet, are also the most affordable. Again, it comes back to a whole food plant-based approach. Keep in mind that with plant-based eating, it's often the small packages of processed, quote, healthy convenience foods that drive up grocery bills. So what plant foods are terrific for your health, planetary health, and your budget? Thankfully, the short answer is lots. Take dried beans and lentils, for instance. 1 pound could cost just a couple of dollars, and when cooked, they expand, providing numerous servings for just fractions of the original cost. Also consider whole grains. These also expand when cooked and are very satiating compared to bags of snack food that are not only mostly air, but also tend to provide many calories from fat without much fiber, water, or protein to promote satiety. Yes, when whole grains are purchased organic, their price tag goes up, and when we choose rare or more interesting varieties like black rice, they can also be pricier than the less expensive varieties. But when it comes down to cost per serving, typically whole plant foods are more affordable. Simply consider the difference between rolled oats and a processed boxed breakfast cereal. When it comes to fruit and veg, there's a whole range of prices anywhere from carrots that cost less than $1 a pound to rarities like organic Romanesco, which can cost upwards of $5 a pound or more. While it can be fun to splurge on those unique varieties for the sake of taste, nutrition, or both, your wallet will benefit most from purchasing the bulk of your fresh fruit and veg from the most affordable varieties and taking advantage of sales on produce that are in season. For instance, when it comes to something like onions, opt for yellow onions most of the time. Certainly you can sprinkle in some red onions, scallions, and shallots, as these are terrific sources of additional micronutrients and add both nuance of flavor and diversity to your diet. But if affordability is a big deal for you, make a habit of leaning into those most affordable varieties as your staples. Key to getting the affordability benefits of plant-based eating is to shop smart. One way to shop smart is to ask yourself if there is a more affordable alternative. For instance, when it comes to greens, while that price tag on a pound of salad greens can seem like a lot, they actually go a long way. Compare the price for a pound of greens with those little containers of living butter lettuce. Yes, the pound of greens is typically $1 or $2 more, but you're likely getting about 3 times or more as much for your money. Let's say you want to make lettuce wraps for dinner. Rather than paying top dollar for a small amount of butter lettuce or little gem, opt for a deconstructed lettuce wrap salad, piling the filling over a bed of greens to get more greens for your dollar. In general, anytime a recipe calls for something particularly expensive, ask yourself if there's a reasonable swap. Either that, or perhaps use less of that special ingredient and supplement with something else. Walnuts and pine nuts are a great example of this. Walnuts are generally half the cost of pine nuts. While I adore pine nuts and enjoy using them to make a pasta dish extra special, making a homemade pesto doesn't require pine nuts, nor does it require basil. Poor man's pesto, as I like to call it, can be made with kale and walnuts, saving money without sacrificing nutrition. Another way to shop smart is to be sure not to stock up on too much. Wasting food is like throwing money into the trash a few bucks at a time. It may not seem like a lot, but if this is a recurring theme in your home, over time it really adds up, not to mention food waste contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. If you notice you regularly end up throwing unused food away, opt for purchasing less at the front end. Opt for making extra trips to the store if needed, rather than wasting food and money. To shop smart, you might also consider how filling a food is. For instance, various kinds of potatoes are a great bang for buck as far as satiety is concerned. I like to make split pea soup regularly in the fall and winter, which is mostly split peas and red potatoes, and this is probably one of the most affordable meals I make all year. A large pot of this soup might cost roughly $5 for the ingredients, but after eating it for several days, we still have some to freeze for later. Definitely under $1 per serving. Back to potatoes. There are so many colors and options. Think beyond the russet and try red, gold, blue, and purple varieties in hundreds of applications. And don't forget about the various types of sweet potatoes. Squashes fall into a similar bucket. During autumn and winter, when they're in season, embrace the beauty of winter squash, both the flavors and the low prices. One topic I have yet to broach is the comparison in price between plant-based and animal-based products. Most whole plant foods are more affordable than animal products, especially when considering good quality against good quality. Again, while plant-based convenience foods can get a bit pricey, sticking to the basics like whole fruits, vegetables, dried and canned legumes, and whole grains will very likely decrease your spending on groceries. For example, while organic grass-fed ground beef can easily cost $9 a pound, 1 pound of dried organic lentils can cost less than $3. Plus, dried lentils absorb water and approximately double in volume and weight, so the cost per pound cooked is less than $1.50 per pound. Taking another legume as an example, 1 pound of dried black beans cooks up to more than 4 cans worth, so while you might pay $3 a pound of organic dried black beans, that $3 worth of dried black beans gets you the equivalent of at least $8 of canned organic beans. But even if you opt for the canned beans in the first place, say for convenience, each can of beans contains about 9 ounces or just over half a pound of cooked beans once drained. In that case, 2 cans of organic beans still cost less than half of that pound of organic grass-fed ground beef, which will actually lose some of its weight during cooking. But what about the protein in ground beef, you might be wondering? Yes, the beef has protein. So do the beans. The beans also have fiber, which the beef does not have. The beef also has more fat, especially saturated fat, which we would all do well to limit. And that's just the major nutritional players. Back to the initial point about protein, though, if we compared organic 85% lean grass-fed ground beef to organic cooked black beans, the beef certainly wins the protein comparison. I can be honest about that. 4 ounces of this ground beef has a whopping 21 grams of protein, while a similar serving size of black beans has about half that at 9 grams. But before you quit listening to this episode and give up on plants, protein isn't the only nutrient, nor should it necessarily be the main one we concern ourselves with. In his book about the scientific evidence supporting a plant-based diet for both human and planetary health, The Proof is in the Plants, Simon Hill advocates that we be fiber-obsessed and protein-aware. While black beans don't rival this ground beef for protein content, they contain very little fat, just half a gram in a half-cup serving and almost no saturated fat, while packing in an impressive gram-for-gram fiber-to-protein ratio. That's laudable. Also, please note that anytime I reference various resources, studies, or written or digital works, I'll include their information in the show notes. So check those out. I want you all to have a chance to fact check me and explore and learn more on your own too. Okay, so black beans have a lot of fiber. Great. What if you're concerned about higher levels of protein in your meals? Are there plant foods relatively high in protein? That is, comparable with meat? Yes, there are. Sticking with minimally processed options, rather than the highly processed meat alternatives, which, side note, have still been shown to promote better health than the best quality meats, but that's an episode for another day. You can check out the show notes in the meantime. Sticking with minimally processed options, in super firm tofu, a 3-ounce serving offers 14 grams of protein, with just 7 grams of total fat, only 1 gram of which is saturated. A 4-ounce serving would have about 18 to 19 grams of protein, just below the 85% lean ground beef, which, by the way, has 17 grams of total fat, 6 grams of which is saturated. And remember, meat has no fiber. As for affordability, 1 pound of super firm tofu can ring you up between $3 and $6, so 1/3 to 2/3 of the cost of that beef. To go one better, check out tempeh. I'm a big fan of Trader Joe's tempeh, sold in 8-ounce packs. 2 of these, weighing in at 1 pound, will cost about $5 and provide 19 grams of protein for a 3-ounce serving. Thus, about 25 grams of protein for a 4-ounce serving, beating out that beef. Its fat composition is nearly identical to the super firm tofu, and it also has the terrific addition of 10 grams of dietary fiber for 3 ounces. And to set the nutritional details aside for a moment to return to the topic at hand, affordability, let's remember that both of these high-protein plant-based items ring in at roughly half the cost of meat. Happy body, happy wallet. I realized that I only provided the comparison of one kind of meat, not getting into eggs, fish, dairy, and the like, let alone other cuts of meat. Nor did I get into potential plant-based counterparts and swaps, but perhaps I'll get into those in the future. Let me know if that's something you'd like to hear. I chose to compare plant sources of protein to organic grass-fed ground beef primarily because, 1, beef is the largest emitter, so it's where I would advocate starting if you're ready to try out some swaps. And 2, if any of us still chooses to consume some amount of animal products, I think it's crucial to get the best kind possible. Animal welfare should not be an afterthought. It costs a lot to support kind, responsible agriculture. We need to reckon with that and be willing to pay the price. If your pocketbook can't handle that, eat less of it. And that's where filling up on whole plants is so good. Good for you, good for Eden, and good for your wallet. While there are a lot of ways this episode can be applied practically, I'll get you started with just a few simple tips you can build upon. First, do a grocery audit. What do you purchase each week? What does it cost you? Take a look at receipts, past meal plans, and make some lists. Do a bit of recon of your own spending habits when it comes to food. Second, choose some swaps. Figure out alternatives that would be more affordable than some of the items you're regularly buying. Or they could be roughly the same price, with the swap being better for the environment, such as organic soy milk in place of organic cow's milk. Make a list of the top 5 swaps you'd like to try, and choose one to implement each week, adding on to the ones before. For instance, you might start with purchasing less ground beef and trying black beans in its place. The next form might be swapping soy or almond milk for cows, purchasing rolled oats instead of boxed breakfast cereals, stocking up on whole potatoes instead of potato chips or frozen fries, and buying tofu or tempeh in place of pork or chicken. If adding in new swaps each week feels too fast, feel free to lengthen the time between as needed. The goal for this is to be sustainable for you, not a burden. Third and finally, pay attention to how your grocery spending shifts over time. I recognize that life seasons ebb and flow. There may be times when you're hosting more gatherings and feeding more people or stocking up on bulk items in an irregular manner. There will be some of that. It's okay. While it may take some time to see the larger impact of these swaps, generally speaking, once you have a well-stocked kitchen and you're comfortable using the swaps you've incorporated, you will likely notice that your weekly grocery bill is much lower than it used to be. Well, friends, thanks for sticking with me here. As usual, there's much more that could be said, but that's why I have a new episode for you each week. Let's continue the conversation. In the meantime, start where you are, do what you can, and build from there. Thanks for listening to Eating for Eden. If you found this episode informative or inspiring, please consider sharing it with a friend. Climate change is an issue we all need to tackle together, so let's invite others to journey along with us as we continue the conversation and start taking action. Until next week, friends, take care.